I think there was a talk for a long time that, well, the people who are being the most vocal about this are going to end up getting targeted by law enforcement. Well, it looks like that may in fact be true.
Let's turn now to one of our favorite reporters out there that doesn't work for Town Hall, but we can't win them all. She's Mary Margaret Olohan. She's senior reporter for Daily Signal. And Mary Margaret, thank you for joining us here because this is a remarkable story that you uncovered yesterday.
Thank you for having me. Love coming on.
So this involves the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, and their activism here on transgender issues. They actually, well, you tell me exactly what they did here.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting story that we got the scoop on thanks to the Oversight Project here at the Heritage Foundation. Basically, Oversight got a hold of this email in a FOIA from the Washington State Fusion Center, and that email shows the ADL communicating with law enforcement, specifically the Washington State Fusion Center out there on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. And in this email, the ADL was alerting them to online amplifiers of LGBTQ plus hate. Well, in that email, the ADL basically paraphrases a big blog post they have that specifically talks about how Matt Walsh, the Libs of TikTok account, Chris Rufo, and Blaze Media are apparently perpetrators of extremism. And in that same article, they talk about how this type of content is going to put people in danger. And that's concerning enough on its own.
Yeah.
But the ADL spends a lot of time and resources on talking about how extremism online can become extremism in real life. And they talk about how they have this collaboration with GLAAD, very pro-LGBTQ organization, to alert law enforcement to this type of extremism. So the short of it is the ADL was telling law enforcement, you should be looking at these opponents of transgender ideology, and you should be keeping an eye on them because they might be extremists themselves and they might be starting extremist activities.
Wow. It's like they've told the Southern Poverty Law Center to hold their beer, ADL is what's happened to this group. Let's set the ADL aside for just a quick second. I want to circle back to them. But what is this law enforcement entity specifically that they reported to? Is this under the auspices of the FBI or the Justice Department?
So the state fusion centers are funded by DHS and DoJ. This specific one, I believe they describe it as a counterterrorism center. And when I reached out to them for a comment, I heard from a Washington State police kind of organization that partners with them. And I was told that they are not currently investigating Matt Walsh or Chris Rufo or Libs of TikTok. And he specifically said, we don't investigate anyone at the direction of the ADL, paraphrasing my email to him. And he sounded kind of upset about it. But He did say, we get tips from everyone. We look into these tips. And he said, we're aware that if we get them from certain ideological places, they might have a bias. But he also said they look into all the tips that they get. So in effect, the ADL is tipping off law enforcement agencies, and whether or not the law enforcement agencies are taking into account that the ADL is incredibly left-wing, progressive, one might say extremists themselves, law enforcement is still examining their tips.
This is a Justice Department who has already been quick to investigate parents who go to school board meetings or Catholics who attend the traditional Latin Mass and other really dangerous domestic terror groups. So they seem to be open to the idea of investigating Libs of TikTok. Chaya Raichek, who runs Libs of TikTok, as if she were a domestic terrorist or a hate monger, because all she does is put a spotlight on what certain transgender activists are already putting out on social media themselves.
Yeah, it's particularly concerning since this is something that I think a lot of high-profile conservatives have been raising the alarm about for a long time now. We always say that when you talk about transgender ideology, you're angering some on the left. And I think there was a talk for a long time that, well, the people who are being the most vocal about this are going to end up getting targeted by law enforcement. Well, it looks like that may in fact be true. And based on what my colleague Tyler O'Neill has reported about the Southern Poverty Law Center and the FBI, and we know how officials were looking into the very traditional Latin Mass Catholics. Hopefully I'm not one of them. There are reasons to be concerned that officials are looking into those who are deemed extremists by the Southern Poverty Law Center or the ADL or GLAAD. Who
Right.
knows what's next? Planned Parenthood, I'm sure, under the FACE Act. So it's just another example of these left-wing organizations working with federal officials to target opponents of their ideology.
Has the ADL given you any sort of response? Have they, did you ask them for a quote on this, or whether they can confirm that they, or deny that they actually blew the whistle, so to speak, on, that really scary guy, Matt Walsh, for making a movie asking a simple question, what is a woman?
Well, I gave them over a week to respond, actually. This is one of my more annoying traits when I write stories is I'll keep replying to my press inquiries and I'll be like, hey, I'm just following up on this. Sometimes people respond, the ADL did not. And I would love to hear from them. I would love to ask them, who else is on your distribution list besides the Washington State Fusion Center? How often do you get your tips investigated? Which ones are you the most proud of that actually were investigated? And can you claim responsibility for any of these extremists getting investigated or put in jail? I am positive that they have a list of that. And I'm positive that they celebrate that privately.
So the Anti-Defamation League obviously was founded. It was actually founded before World War II, before they saw the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe, and sadly here in America as well. They were founded to push back specifically on anti-Semitism and the defamation of Jewish people around the world. They had a pristine track record, and most people, whether they were Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, they all basically had quite a bit of respect for the Anti-Defamation League. That has changed very quickly, and suddenly now, rather than looking out for and defending against rampant anti-Semitism at a time when we see horrific anti-Semitism on college campuses and in the halls of Congress, sadly, instead they decided that this is their new target. This is the new flag that they've got to wave to protect against Matt Walsh and Libs of TikTok and Chris Rufo.
It's really sad, and you're totally right, Larry. There is such a rise in anti-Semitic crimes and hate crimes, in horrific way that college students are treated. I mean, I've been at the protests and heard all these horrible things that the college students are saying about Israel and about other Israeli students. But no, the ADL has chosen to focus on extremism in the form of people who want to protect children from surgeries that will change their lives and from hormones that will irrevocably change their bodies. So
Yeah.
this is what the ADL is fixating on.
I'm curious, in this FOIA request, when you see emails from the ADL, flagging actions or statements from Matt Walsh, Libs of TikTok, did they give any specific examples? Like what exactly is an example of hate speech with regard to this transgender issue?
Well, in that blog post, it's very interesting which examples they cite. For example, the ADL took issue with Chris Rufo talking about how drag queen story hours are a form of grooming children. The ADL did not like that, and they said that's a false claim that they're grooming children. And let's just remember what we're talking about here. We're talking about children going to a show where a man dresses up as a woman sexually in weird, revealing outfits and dances. We've even seen videos of children putting money in the clothing of these dancers. So, this is what Rufo's talking about, and the ADL's like, that's not child grooming. Well, if that's not, I don't know what is.
Yeah, really. So calling that grooming is hate speech, according to the ADL.
Yeah, and that's just one example. That
If somebody drove up in a white van to a playground and acted that way in front of children, they would be arrested.
Right.
But because it's done under the auspices of a story hour, suddenly it needs to be protected. Unbelievable. Great story, great reporting. Thank you for staying on top of it. And I'll say a prayer in Latin on your behalf there, Mary Margaret. I hope you're not on that list.
Appreciate it.